I'm a pretty sentimental person. I tend to think back to my childhood and teen years a lot because, to be truthful, I miss it. Life was so simple back then, in comparison to the hectic mess that I deal with now. Sometimes it's just nice to remember the good times and relive them. Just last week, I moved into my new apartment after arriving in my new city for better job opportunities. The apartment wasn't suspiciously cheap. It was an average price for this particular area. The apartment wasn't too special or too run down. It was a pretty nice run-of-the-mill, typical college graduate's first apartment type of deal. I had a friend from back home volunteer to help me move in, and the next day they left early in the morning for the 3-hour drive back home. It was just me. Now, I have to admit I was a little bit emotional, as this was the first time I was ever truly on my own. Even in college, I had the company of a dorm roommate. Now, all I had was neighbors, who were total strangers, and the people walking on the streets outside my window. I've always been slightly paranoid, so I did an occasional investigation around the house to make sure I was alone. Every nook and cranny, closet, and even the air vents were closely inspected with my flashlight. I'm pretty confident to say I was as alone as I could be. I didn't even find any crawly creatures or the like. That would be a good thing, since one of my biggest fears about living alone was not having someone to kill the bugs for me. I continued about my life for the following days, getting adjusted and searching for employment. I spent some time trying to set up the small TV I had brought from my childhood home, but I didn't have much luck. There wasn't much I could do for entertainment besides browse my phone, which meant using up my data since I was yet to get Wi-Fi, or go outside and explore the city streets. I spent some time doing both and made sure to send my mother and sister videos of the huge buildings and bridges that surrounded me. I arrived home one night from an adventure of walking across a bridge over the ocean and settled in my bed for the night. It was quite cold because my heating was pretty crap, but I had made sure to bring as many blankets as I could find in my old room. I laid in my bed and snuggled under an old blanket that I remember always laying with when I was a teenager. I would always snuggle with my cat on Friday nights, since I only had a few friends who also didn't like to leave their homes. Growing up, it was just my parents, my sister, and I. We had a typical middle-class house, so lucky for my sister and I, we both got our own room. As I laid in my new apartment bed, I smiled at the memory of how every night I would knock on the wall 3 times, and my sister would always knock back. It was our thing. Our rooms were right next to each other, so the shared wall was easy to hear knocking through. Unlike typical siblings, my sister and I always got along pretty well. It must have been because we were both pretty lonely, so we were each other's sort of best friend. We were only a year apart, and I was the older one. Right now my sister is in her senior year of college. I teared up at the thought of our secret knock, as I didn't talk to my sister that often anymore. It's like the bittersweet feeling of remembering your old high school friend that you haven't seen in forever. Being my old sentimental self, I decided to do it for old time's sake. I needed to feel like I was back home. I leaned over, looking at the wall of the bedroom. In my apartment, my bedroom bordered a very small closet. I softly knocked 3 times, smiling, before turning away and looking up at the ceiling. It was about 10 seconds after that I suddenly heard an unmistakable 3 knocks back. I froze, my eyes wide. I looked back at the wall, paralyzed in fear. This couldn't be real. I knocked 3 times again, and it was followed with a soft, but still very evident 3 knocks back. I sprang from my bed, grabbing a hammer I had laying on the floor from moving in. I approached the closet slowly, trying not to make much noise. I quickly sprung the door open and was met with darkness. I flipped the switch on and I found a completely empty closet. I did a full check of my house like I had done tons of times before. Nothing. This couldn't have been coincidence. I decided to push it off and told myself I was just imagining things. Maybe I was just hearing the memory of my sister's knocks out of pure emotion. I told myself I needed to rest and headed to bed. The rest of the day I couldn't get this strange occurrence out of my head. The familiar knocking pattern ran in my head. How could this be possible? It finally got to me, and I just had to try it again. It was too strange to just forget, and I had to see if it was a permanent thing. I sat in my bed staring at the wall. I had checked the closet prior and even set up a camera to make sure it was empty. Against a slight pit in my stomach that was filled with a strange feeling of dread, I knocked 3 times. I waited a few seconds and it came. The 3 knocks. "What the frig?" I yelled. I knocked again, this time a bit harder. The same calm, soft knocks returned. I was beginning to feel angry. I felt like the knocking was mocking me. Its calm demeanor was just taunting my fearful mind. My knocks became more aggressive and were always met with the same thing, but the mysterious knocks became more rapid and impatient. I finally knocked a final time. At this point, it was just loud banging with my whole hand. I wasn't prepared for what returned. A huge, loud banging returned. 3 knocks, but it was so aggressive, so hostile, and inhuman. It was like a tornado was throwing debris at the wall. The sudden loud sound shocked me, and I jumped up, terrified. I ran to the closet and was unsurprisingly met with emptiness. I grabbed the camera and brought it back to my room with me. What I saw was nothing. It was just the closet. But the knocking, even the soft knocking, was amplified. It wasn't the muffled sound from in my room. On the tape, the knocking was very clearly coming from inside of that closet. It sounded like the knocking was happening right beside the camera. In a moment of panic, I called my sister. I just had to vent this whole situation to her, as she was the only one who could understand. I Skyped her, and as she answered, I saw her familiar face. She was smiling, and she seemed genuinely happy to see me. She greeted me, telling me that she missed me. Her face then changed to that of concern. "Are you okay? You look scared," she said. I explained to her in a panicked tone why I had called. I went through everything. She seemed genuinely scared for me. She told me that I needed to call the police immediately. I nodded, out of breath, and began to dial 911, trying to stay calm. I was about to press the call button when my sister said something that sent chills throughout my entire body. My sister said to me, her voice trembling, that while we were growing up, she never once knocked on the wall back at me.